Also, maybe another opportunity for startups like Google's moat is shrinking. Consumer behavior is changing for the first time. Maybe time to kind of jump in with different solutions. So really, really fast. It's interesting to kind of see the through lines in all these different topics. But
3, 2, 1, go!
All right, we're back. Another episode, Rush Hour Podcast. I'm TW, this is Justin. We're just two tech dudes that are non-technical with 30 plus 40 years of experience in the tech industry. It's crazy. We've seen it all. We're here to spit some game, talk about the latest news. First up, we got tariffs, our truce, kind of. We've got Microsoft, more layoffs. What does that mean for us, in tech? And then lastly, AI versus search. We got some new data I thought we'd jump into. So we'll kick it off. Justin, give us the update on tariffs. They're delayed, they're paused 90 days, but they're still at 30% and 10% in there. Give us a rundown. What's going on?
yeah, sure. So unless you've been living under a rock, we've been in a bit of a tariff war, a bit of a trade war with some of our some friendly countries, but also maybe some foes or perceived foes as well. And there's been particular tension with the U.S. and China, and the markets got a little bit of a respite, a few days ago with the ratcheting down of the tariff situation, with both China and the U.S. kind of stepping off a ledge. So just to kind of orient, the U.S. was at I think it was at 145% on Chinese goods, and brought that down to 30%. And then China reduced from 125 to 10%. So still higher, but like not nearly as punishing and crazy. Like TW said, it's only a 90-day pause right now, and no formal deal. Who knows? In this timeline that we're in, things can change pretty quickly. I think both countries benefit from more trade and opportunities there. So hopefully it's like kind of stepping off the crazy ledge. That being said, it's still a high cost of doing business relative to where we were before. The 30% tariff is very high relative to historical standards, and this will impact everyday small businesses and consumers. And what you're also seeing is a lot of companies are scrambling for inventory now because they're not exactly sure what's going to happen. So they are just, shipments are going crazy, and these spikes will increase, kind of similar, almost like what we saw during the COVID period. And consumer prices will also likely raise. There's been some price pain, and now will continue. So what does that mean for Silicon Valley and the world of startups? Well, firstly, I think if you're like a hardware startup right now, definitely going to be costlier, prototyping costs and production cycles. I think for big tech, there may be some more like delay launches or pricing shifts during this time, that people should be aware of. And, VC is like, this is no longer the time of kind of free money flows, man. The ZERP era is over. Looking for more diversification, looking for more, in this time of uncertainty. Like if you're working in startups, if you're working in tech right now, your company's got to look pretty amazing because there's just so much uncertainty. And so that's kind of the lay of the land right now. What stands out in that news for you, Tito? How are you evaluating?
So I have runs a import exporting business that primarily out of China is where most of their business comes. And he was saying most companies have paused everything also. And things take a while. You kind of heard it on the news, but him saying, "Hey, my business is really slow." So everyone's kind of just waiting and seeing where this thing gonna land before making any big orders. I mean, orders that were on the way, they have not taken them. They're just sitting there. So it's kind of interesting. We're gonna see probably empty shelves was what I heard, regardless, because it takes a month. So what that means, I'm not sure. Like it seems like people are going to be not able to consume, and I think that's going to trickle down slowly. I think April looked good because a lot of people like moved up their big spends and bought cars and all these things, so the economy probably looks better than what it actually is. And I think people are going to pause on a lot of bigger purchases, which I think will trickle down into the numbers here over the next quarter or so. So we'll see. Unless something gets done pretty quickly, my guess is we'll see, quarterly earnings drop across the board. Everything big tech all the way down to retail, which makes total sense. My question for you is, does this help or stifle innovation? Because you think about, let's just say, for example, Apple innovating or somebody innovating on a new product type that has hardware. Now you've got this tax. Are you gonna necessarily invest in R&D on the latest, greatest new thing? Or are you gonna wait till this figures itself out before you jump in and create something new? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that these companies, these kind of like behemoth tech companies, Mag 7 type of companies, they are so profitable. Like their corporate profits and everything are higher than they've kind of ever been. Everything is kind of doing well for the business. Obviously, maybe they're feeling some pain, but that pain isn't necessarily hitting their bottom line. And if they want to make more investments in hardware or software when it comes to kind of data centers or, just AI generally, where you're going to see that is you're going to see that on operating expenses and headcount and on the people side. So I think they're going to continue to invest. I think that because they just have the cash, they have the positioning, they have kind of the favor of the Trump administration as well. You saw that trip that a lot of the CEOs did with Trump to the Middle East recently to kind of curry favor with the countries out there and kind of tout their partnerships with these different parts of the world. So I think they continue to invest. I think that for all other companies, it definitely becomes a trickier time, time of belt tightening. But yeah, they're definitely still going to be investing on kind of like the research and development side and not slowing things down. But it's definitely it's definitely a trickier period. One thing I'm curious about from you is we hear a lot about what's going on in the US and the challenges around tariffs here. I've been listening to some kind of news and podcasts around, hey, how is this impacting, maybe diving deeper into how this is impacting folks in China and kind of some of the macro dynamics in the economy. Do you have any kind of insights there? I think I have some stuff that I've kind of heard around the way, but just kind of curious if any insights for listeners from that perspective.
No, I mean, it's kind of the same. There's also a concern on their end, which is, hey, there are going to be less jobs. There's not going to be as much. We don't want American products. It's just kind of the inverse for them, which is like, hey, is this going to impact us? There's also a big question mark from what I hear in that manufacturing portion of how is robots and AI going to impact the business in China? That's
Mm-hmm.
been an ongoing issue, and this just made it accelerated because they're already like, hey, they don't need all these people in these factories tidying. I mean, they talk about it. We don't. They don't need it. They're robots and things that can work all night, and they're real concerns. Like, hey, we have all of this manpower that may not be needed. The concern of AI taking over in the U.S. is even bigger in China. So I think I think both sides of the equation are probably definitely concerned. Like, there's no probably. They're definitely concerned. So I think you know the pause is helpful, but I think all of it is probably a bluff. Like America and China need each other in
Yeah,
the long run. So like this is a big bluff into who's less scared, and ultimately I think it's sort of a symbiotic thing. They're gonna have to figure it out. Where it lands, I have no idea, but my guess is it'll be delayed and continued in a lot of puffing out the chest until we get somewhere that's a little more reasonable for both sides.
yeah. To your point, I know that China's invested trillions of dollars into their manufacturing capabilities. Not only they have an army of folks who kind of are in manufacturing jobs and can do that work really successfully, but then you talk about all the investments they've made in these streamlined manufacturing centers, and that only works as a play for their economy if they're still doing a tremendous amount of exporting. Like, those are the coveted jobs, those are the coveted roles, and it doesn't necessarily trickle down to kind of all of China. It does impact the economy, but they don't have a consumer economy, right? German economy. That everyone is kind of based on manufacturing, and people aren't necessarily buying products there. In fact, I was reading the savings rate of folks in China is 2x that of the U.S.
Yeah.
because it's not really the same social safety nets, and a lot of the investment that people have made has been into real estate, and we know the real estate markets in China have gotten devastated. People lost their entire life savings. So I think it's just kind of just to even further build on your point of like we're both kind of intimately tied. Consumers need to consume in the U.S. to make that economy work. People need the manufacturing jobs, and they need that mechanism in China to continue to drive their growth. And so TLDRs, I think they'll kind of come to some final conclusion that benefits both countries. But in the interim, it's not necessarily great for consumers and small businesses or
No,
tech.
my thought is kind of like COVID, where the shakeup from COVID is, hey, a lot of people can work from home. It doesn't, I think the shakeup out of this is, hey, maybe I don't need all this stuff. Maybe I don't need to consume and spend all my money, and maybe I need to save more in the US. All of those things seem to be like people are debating, right? Like, hey, do I really need this new car? Do I really need this, the latest iPhone or whatever it is?
Mhm.
And like Trump said, you don't need $30. Just get one for your kid. Because that is something you don't hear a lot.
Yeah.
And I think people are probably gonna think about that this year. And maybe, the consumerism of America plateaus and is maybe trends down, and maybe we're gonna be at a different level like we were after COVID. I don't know. That's what I kind of feel like will happen, which will ultimately mean everything lowers just a little bit, right? You'll need less products and less exporting, and then maybe that, I don't know. That's going to be really interesting to see where it pans out, but that seems like a logical step. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so, and maybe that kind of like dovetails well into just AI and the impact and like what's going on in the world is changing every industry. And one thing that we talk about a lot is just this changing landscape in tech. We're living it in Silicon Valley here every day. It's a different vibe. It's a
It is
way different vibe out here than a
very.
few years ago, and AI is fueling that. Right now, like the cost of it is in layoffs and job cuts. And kind of to transition into some of the Microsoft news. So a few days ago, Microsoft announced that they laid off 6,000 people, which is about 3% of their global workforce. I think it's one of the largest cuts they've done in a while, though. You can kind of say that over the last few years, all these companies, like, it's the largest cuts. And then in a few more months, it's like, it's the largest cuts they've done, the next time. What was interesting is when Microsoft talked about these cuts, they talked about the layoffs being a capital optimization move. So cutting headcount to reinvest in AI infrastructure and product development. We've been talking about this all the time of what the trend is and where things are going. And they had $80 billion earmarked in AI spend for fiscal year 2025,
Man,
which is, a lot of money, but they got it like we were talking about. They got the money. So what is the impact of this? Well, one, great for shareholders, right? The stock soared, they hit almost 450 this week, their stock price near the all-time high. And investors are very, remain really confident. It's still a high margin product and quarterly earnings of $70 billion of revenue in the last quarter. And it's like, okay, well, all right, these companies are doing better than they have ever done before. They just cut 6,000 people. Will they cut more, or will we start to kind of see that slow? And my impression has always been it's going to accelerate. Everybody's trying to get to that Elon model of kind of, hey, can we get down to, can we cut by 70%? Can we get down to as efficient as possible? And one analyst who looks at Microsoft was saying that they believe that the headcount reductions, in order for them to kind of make up for the capital expenditures in AI, will have to be 10,000 cuts a year just to offset capital depreciation costs. So every year that they're doing more AI investment leads to more trade-offs. So, what's the takeaway from this? I mean, mine is that one, AI is no longer moonshot. It's not like crypto. It's like this is the strategy. Every company kind of invests in this strategy, and in order for them to execute it, they got to trim down. And so if you're a startup, you're an incumbent, like this is, and startups are probably already seeing this. This is like a leaner future of AI tools, and even the top companies in the valley are implementing the same strategy. So, what do you think? Like, how do you stay competitive in this time? I feel like we beat a dead horse around this, but I think it's worth sharing to just provide some practical guidance.
yeah, I think it's kind of the same. You got to figure these things out on your own too. Like, how can AI help you in your career and advancement and learning and all of those things? These are tools that you're going to just have to embrace. This is not one of those, you know, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram thing that's for kids. Like, you really have to figure this thing out, to how you can incorporate it into your life. And I think a lot of people have. When we first jumped on a year ago and talked, we were like, "Hey, does anyone actually use ChatGPT?" Remember that?
Yeah, yeah,
It was like, "Do you actually go in there and ask it everyday things?" And back then, the answer was a resounding no. We don't use it. Now, everyone I know is ask ChatGPT instead of Google it, which I think is a real thing now. So it is gone in from a thing to now a habit. This is part of the top 5 things you do on your phone every day, that are habitual. This is one of them.
yeah,
Like, when you think of something you don't know, you ask ChatGPT now. Whereas you used to have to Google it and figure it out. Now it's like you literally go there, and then maybe if you're not satisfied, then you go and Google it, right? Uh, which I think is a really interesting, you know, shift in this stuff.
What is your top use case for using ChatGPT now,
Well,
and how frequently do you use it?
right now, the most incredible thing is I'm taking care of my mother. She's had some health issues, and I put everything in there: doctor's appointments, labs, all of that. I put everything in there, and it kind of like helps spit out all the information for me and save it. So I've got this like caregiver prompt that I've put, blood sugar, glucose, all of the things that are like obviously super personal and private, but I'm putting them in there, and it's giving me questions to ask my doctors, what I should think of, what are these signs of and symptoms of, and what I should do. And it's been incredible because I don't know what I would do with it. So that alone has given me, like, on a personal level, a lot of comfort, because it's just like I
You
basically
got a
have a
co-pilot.
yeah, I have a doctor on call that at least can give me the advice that I need. Last week we had some issues, and I put it in. I was like, "Hey, should I take her to the ER? Should we go to the doctor?" And it was like, "Here are the symptoms. Here are the things. Here's when you should think about it." And I started checking them off. I'm like, "All right, I'm going to the ER." It just made the decision so much easier. So that is my biggest use case at the moment, but for everyday use. And you can see it, like, buying a house, buying a car, having an assistant kind of there to guide you through the process is pretty incredible. Like, it's not fully integrated the way I think it will be in the future, because it is still a lot of me going in there and typing in what I want, and working sort of the magic of prompts. I feel like in the future it's going to be more predictive.
Yeah,
I won't have to ask; it'll just like be tapped into everything and know. So we'll see. You know, the caregiver part is
mm,
real. It's really beneficial. I can say that. How
yeah.
about you? What are you doing on AI now?
Yeah, I primarily use ChatGPT. It's become kind of like, definitely on a daily basis. And one, it kind of helps with a lot of like mundane tasks and things that I have to do. Like there are certain, I work with a number of different startups. There are certain like research that I do and formats, et cetera, like that I leverage that just make it a lot easier for me to execute across all the clients that I support, particularly when it comes to research, competitor research, helping me think through positioning and messaging, and just kind of getting up to speed on businesses much faster. That's been super helpful. And then to your point, as I have different questions about what's going on, either in the news or ideas that I have, et cetera, being able to have back and forth conversations, it's interesting. It must be just kind of the age and time we're in now, but like I have some friends dealing with some health issues and kind of using that to figure out how I can support them or what they're going through as well. But it's incredibly valuable resource. It's so interesting to think about how much less I think about Google now, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
just in my day to day. And when I do use it, it's for kind of like going directly to a website,
Yeah.
like directly to the resource as opposed to doing the research, like all the research pieces, et cetera. I'm typically doing, via ChatGPT now, and then I'll kind of go to Google to go direct. And I imagine if us tech folks are the canary in the coal mine for emergent behavior and what's happening, that this is
Yeah.
scary hours
Yeah.
for Google, who's had kind of the cash cow,
How are you doing?
high margin business.
Are you going mobile phone app, ChatGPT? Are you putting that? Is that on your home screen now?
It's not on my home screen on mobile, but I do use it on. I probably use desktop 70% of the time, mobile 30% of the time, because I'm just kind of doing work at my desk. But then what I found is kind of interesting is if I'm going back between like some decision that I need to make, sometimes I'll use the phone and just have a conversation back and forth. Yeah, like I found that that's helpful for me to kind of get my ideas out. So that's primarily the mobile use case. But it's
Interesting.
really fascinating how my behavior has changed. And it's so cool. Like have time to think about now's time we kind of explore those things, those thoughts, in this conversation. But that is, yeah, it's been really interesting to see that behavioral change.
Yeah, in the last year, and I was thinking about, like, what made that change, and it is really about product. Like, the better answers you get, the more feedback you get, you tend to be like, "Hey, you know what? Use it once out of novelty, and then you use it once like, hey, maybe I should ask this." And then it's like it just keeps growing and growing in terms of, it's not even a viral thing. It's just like intuitively you're like, "Hey, you know what? This is more efficient for me. I'm going to start going instead of going to
Yeah,
Google." Which
yeah,
we talk about, how do you break into this every day as an everyday app, and they did it like that. It is so hard to do, right?
yeah.
Facebook, Twitter, like these social apps have broken into everyday use, and ChatGPT has done it.
Yeah, but I think when we talk about that and the distribution that they've driven, my only caveat with that would be, well, it's not a caveat. It's just like this is. I think people, in order to switch behavior from spending time on the platforms, the Facebooks and the Instagrams, et cetera, had to be a real like productivity solution, something that's adding true value to your interactions as opposed to just a form of entertainment. I think that's the key for products that exist now. Even like social products that have some type of social layer, it's imbuing some version, some utility that you're getting, because otherwise people's networks are, we talk about this all the time, but people's networks are already on these other platforms and they don't necessarily need another horizontal platform. But what they do need is something that can help them get smarter, make money, make better decisions, learn new things, et cetera. And I think that's kind of like the new age of products and solutions.
And that dovetails into our next topic, right?
Yeah. So this, I mean, all these things, I mean, every 2 weeks, it seems like some crazy things happening in the space. But this particular story is around, Google and the antitrust case that they're dealing with right now, and a testimony by an executive, an SVP, who this SVP's name is Eddie Q, and in court revealed for the first time that web searches via Safari were declining. And the reason why is because more and more users are turning to AI-powered alternatives like ChatGPT and Perplexity and Claude, et cetera. And what Q also hinted at was that Apple was considering adding these AI platforms as official search options within Safari, which signals like a major shift in how iOS users might access information and just get more people to kind of understand that there's all other kind of LMs and models that exist. And so what does that mean for Google, right? Like Google spends $20 billion a year to be the default search engine on Apple devices. And if fewer people are doing searches, like that's obviously going to be hugely impactful on their business. And so on the one hand, it's kind of interesting from an antitrust perspective because it's like, well, if Google's dominance is fading, then maybe we don't need to worry about the antitrust thing as much anymore. But at the same time, what a huge challenge this has within the context of their business model in terms of the behavioral shifts. What does this say? Search engines no longer just about like links. They're about like, it's the language models. It's about that kind of deeper discovery. And also maybe another opportunity for startups, like Google's mode is shrinking. Consumer behavior is changing for the first time. Maybe time to kind of jump in with different solutions. So really, really fascinating. It's interesting to kind of see the through lines in all of these different topics. But yeah, like what are your thoughts on what's going on with Google and dominance? We touched on it a bit, but
It makes a lot of sense. I always was concerned about how people would get out of Google because it's just so ubiquitous. And they put the AI at the top, but I tend to like ignore that because I'm like, hey, if I want an AI answer, I go to ChatGPT.
Interesting. Yeah.
And just out of a mindset, I don't look at the Gemini thing at the top. I just go because like you, I have my way now of like when I use Google, I'm trying to get to a link and trying to get to a site. I'm not trying to hear feedback, which I think is interesting in that that Safari is going to then change the prompt at the top to ChatGPT potentially and have Google as options makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think an overall search in your phone instead of going to Safari and then using your thing. It seems like it's going to make sense just to have a general search in the phone and it'll figure out where it goes, right? If you just search
Yeah.
versus a question, it'll just use the thing that they think makes the most sense. Yeah, I get it.
Do you feel like maybe we're in Silicon Valley, we're early adopters, and we're obviously using all the tools, and but from all that I've read and heard about Google, Google's AI products, I mean, they have tremendously smart people there. They have access to YouTube data. They have like all the search data, et cetera. I know their models are fantastic, but how is it that we're even having this conversation? Like, shouldn't they just be the clear winner relative to the strength of their models and distribution? Is it the UI? Like, is it the application layer? Obviously that's important, but is it like that and the brand and trust? Like, it's really incredible to think about the fact that we're even talking, about these upstarts relative to the incumbent in the space. But yeah, what what are we missing here? Are we making too much ado about it? Like, are average consumers just going to continue using Google? Or I see some ads that they've done on TV as well to like try to get people to use more of those.
Yeah, the ad. I thought about that. I'm like, hey, they're pushing ads because probably because adoption isn't great, and it's the
Mhm.
same issue that I just mentioned. I see it, but my mind goes to I need to use ChatGPT for AI, not Google. Google's for search.
Yeah.
It's just like what we've talked about in the past with like, hey, go to TikTok for short form. Don't give me long form podcasts. Or I go to podcasts for this. Don't try to give me photos. It's just like your mind, the habit form of our human
Yeah.
brains. And I think we are. I don't want to say in the sort of tech bubble of Apple ecosystem, not necessarily Google ecosystem. If you're Android and Google, I wonder if your answer is like, hey, it's much more integrated with Google on my Pixel or Samsung. So I use Gemini a lot. Whereas those that come from Apple have their way of working. That's like, hey, I'll go to Open AI this way versus Google this way. That's my guess as to why we feel that way because we're in the Apple ecosystem, which is already quirky. And
Mhm.
if you weren't, maybe you have a different sort of UI or context that allows you to use Gemini in a way that makes more sense.
I also think about the customer journey a lot and how, folks who are out here in Silicon Valley, more early adopters, but at the same time, who are the broader based early adopters of this technology? It's young people.
Right.
It's Gen Alpha and Gen Z. And if you're a baby boomer or Gen X and you're like, what is this Gen AI thing? Or like, what are these AI searches? And you ask your kids about it, and they're like, don't use that. Use ChatGPT, use Claude, like use these other platforms, right? Then that can kind of disrupt the usage relative to like it being such a new form factor and people are trying to kind of figure out what is the best way to utilize the tool. So I'd be very curious to kind of understand of people who are new to the technology, who started to use it, like how they got introduced to it, why they're using what they use, and who informed them about these new tools. I'd be very intrigued to kind of see that data in mass.
I'm still waiting on the next form factor. I really think that's where this thing goes. Whoever wins that next one is going to probably have a huge step forward because whether it's glasses or clipping it on a hat or whatever the form factor is, the one that can predictively or see what you're seeing and doesn't need you to type and put a lot of context in is going to win because convenience is a huge part of it. Like if I'm walking around, that example of like, where did I put my keys? Where is my phone? Where is the thing that I saw? Where did I see? I'm looking for lotion. Where did I see it? And then, the thing just responds to you. That seems to be where we're headed. How that form factor happens, I have no idea. Maybe it's gonna happen with something we already have. I don't know. But yeah, I feel like that's the next step. I think glasses. The more I
Mhm.
think about it, Google Glass, just those demos that I keep seeing make a lot of sense. Translating, looking for things, like responding to people, telling you. Like the other example that I saw was like you're wearing your glasses, somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, nice to meet you." Immediately, it's saying,
Mhm.
"You know this person from work, but like you've seen this person. Last time you saw this person was July 23rd, and this is what they said to you." Like that is pretty crazy. Like ChatGPT on your phone is not. You're not gonna have the time. Whereas if it's on your glasses and the person walks up, it'll just feed it into your ear. That's crazy. That's like next level, right?
Mm.
I think
So
that's
it's
where we're going.
Yeah, so it's competing on these new form factors as a way to, like, so it'd be them kind of versus kind of Meta with the
Yeah.
with the Ray Bans
Or
and
Snap.
seeing,
Snap had the
or
glasses.
Snapseed. Yeah, that's true.
Snap had glasses early. I think there is something there. Google Glass, Meta, right? All of them are circling around this because there is something there. And I think who wins that race and makes it relatively cool to wear these
Yeah,
glasses, or at least, yeah, it's a fine line, right? Because you want people to know you're wearing them, and like the person that is coming up to you needs to know you're wearing them, which immediately is a red flag because then you're like, oh, I don't want to be the guy that's wearing this thing.
yeah,
So how that works out in the future would be really interesting. Maybe it is what you're doing now. You just have the AirPods in there, and it's got a camera and a thing, and people know that you have it in, and
yeah,
they're okay talking to you with it like that. So I don't know.
yeah. Maybe one last thing I'll say on that is if that technology, and I don't know if you've seen some of these videos of kids like hacking the technology and they're using it and they're like, oh, it can pull up their people's Facebook profiles and like they're talking
Yes.
about stuff like that. So if it does become a form factor, I think the bet that you have to make from a consumer perspective is like privacy. and blocking certain things, etc. Everybody has these glasses. I don't necessarily want to know everything about them.
Yeah.
So how do I curb against that? And those will be the opportunities I think of that form factor that are pretty interesting. Whatever happens, we'll be here to discuss
Yeah,
it.
you're right. That's very much why I don't post a lot of stuff. I don't want all of my business. I don't want a random person to Google me and figure out everything. That doesn't feel right.
Yeah, you just want them to watch the podcast.
Yeah, you just watch the podcast and follow along. Like like if you need to be intentional, not necessarily just have it me feed you all the info. I think that's where it's gonna be. Yeah, I'm excited to see where this thing goes. That's for sure. I feel like we're ways away, but it's also like you said, we're growing this thing quick. In the
Ways away is like 2 years, not 10.
yeah, in the last year we've completely 180'd on AI. Crazy. That's wild. It's impressive. Anyway, all right, man. We're at 30 some minutes. Appreciate everybody. Like and subscribe. Follow Justin on LinkedIn if you're not already. We'll leave all that below, and we'll talk BART ads maybe next week. It's still
Oh yeah,
running, believe it or not.
that's funny. We got to give an update on that, and then maybe what we'll do.
Round two. Yeah.
Yeah, round two. Sounds good. Peace.